So I know of the Straw Hats, Usopp is the character that I think attracts a lot of disdain for being the weakest Straw Hat. Even post time skip, though getting physically stronger and gaining more utility and power, to some people Usopp feels like a non-factor and is getting hard carried by his crew. He has had his moments, but everyone wanted him to become this OP strong character that could compete in the new world. I also think that we as the viewers hold Usopp to some crazy standards. Like I think it's more normal that some random skinny Pinocchio nose kid from East Blue would function the way Usopp does, rather than the rest of the males on the crew. Like, I think it's safe to say that Usopp is the only normal guy on the crew. Everyone else is a monster in their own way. Though I think Usopp will stumble upon an amazing power that will really suit his role on the Straw Hat crew. If you can tell by now, the way I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the Par vision. Given his history, it makes sense that Usopp is relatively peaceful compared to the rest of his crew. Everyone in the crew grew up around violence that ended up shaping them into tougher characters. Luffy had a father figure in Garb and got tossed into jungles with random animals and fought pirates with Ace and Sabo as kids. Zoro was trained in a dojo with constant sparring. Sanji was raised in a military-style environment through Germa 66 and then taught how to fight by Red Leg Zeph. Nami had her mom murdered and was basically kidnapped by pirates. Robin had been on the run from Cypher Pole her entire life and had her entire island Buster called. And Frankie, well, he fought a train. Okay, you get the idea. Usopp was the only character that had a non-violent upbringing, but that being said, it wasn't exactly peaceful. Usopp was sort of abandoned by his father Yasopp, who was in Shanks' crew. Yasopp apparently was given permission by Usopp's mom to leave them to fulfill his dream to be a pirate. So he wasn't that bad, I guess, but I mean, he visited Luffy but never visited Usopp. But that being said, Usopp's mom was sick the entire time we saw her, and Kid Usopp coped by lying to her, saying that Yasopp and the pirates returned to take them both, and so that they wouldn't be lonely. He did this every day in an attempt to keep her hopes up so she would stay strong and continue living. Though Usopp wanted so badly for his words to be true, they never did come true, and eventually his mom passed away, and Usopp continued the lie, which evolved into scaring the town into thinking pirates were coming. But then his lie was answered when Luffy and his crew finally showed up. See, this is the premise of Usopp, lying, or maybe more accurately, manifesting. It's no secret by now that Usopp's words have powers. What starts out as a lie ends up as a truth. Usopp's entire character design is surrounded by the concept of lying. His name Uso, which is the Japanese word for lie, and then the story of how we met Usopp replicates The Boy Who Cried Wolf, a fable attributed to Aesop, a Greek fabulist and storyteller. The moral in the Greek version of the story depicts how even if a liar tells the truth, no one will believe them, which we see a few times with Usopp. Also, Usopp's nose resembles Pinocchio, a boy who is known to lie, which increases his nose length. Also, his long nose can connect him to Tengus. There's a specific story that relates to this power-up video, but I'll share the details of that story a little bit later. Rewinding back to Aesop, in the Aesop romance story, there's 2 points of focus that are interesting. One is that Aesop originally could not speak, but because of his kindness, the goddess Isis bestowed him the power of speech, but also storytelling. The second point I want to highlight is Aesop proclaims that the finest thing imaginable is the tongue. I want to share this quick excerpt from the story where Aesop explains his reasoning. Well, what can one imagine finer or greater than the tongue? You must observe that all philosophy, all education depends on the tongue. Without the tongue, nothing gets done, neither giving, nor receiving, nor buying. By means of the tongue, states are reformed and ordinance and laws laid down. If then, all life is ordered by the tongue, nothing is greater than the tongue. I think this is going to be the core of Usopp's power. If I were to choose Usopp's conceptual words, it would be language and emotions. Despite being a coward, Usopp manages to speak in a motivating way and encourages positivity. He is able to empower through speech, and though he has been noted to be extremely depressed and negative about himself many times, he has said that he will become a great warrior of the sea and the king of snipers. His self-doubt has started to change after the time skip more, but not completely erasing his cowardice, which feels natural. I think Usopp needs a specific catalyst that will solidify his confidence in himself, which I think will come in the Elbaf arc, which if you haven't noticed yet, Elbaf spells fable backwards, which again ties back into Usopp's entire character inspiration. So now that we talked a little bit about the complexities involved in Usopp's character and some foundation for some of the things I want to bring up later, when it comes to Usopp powering up, I think it makes sense that Usopp isn't just beating people up left and right. Though there's been a complex back and forth feeling with Usopp, like he wants to be the brave warrior of the sea, but all throughout One Piece, he has been a tactical fighter. But in some pivotal fights, he has taken out enemies in close combat. Realization with a pirate crew or any group of any kind really, is that not all the members need to be heavy hitters. Teams need a variety of talents, and Usopp provides pretty strong support. In terms of support, he is kind of an all-around support that can protect, damage, provide utility, and communicate. On top of that, he's pretty smart. He has created weapons and tools for the crews and tactics for fights. He's extremely resourceful and can think on his feet. For a normal guy, Usopp has been pretty useful despite it not feeling like he contributes much to the crew. Pre-timeskip, there's been plenty of times where the crew managed to survive thanks to a pivotal role that Usopp played, but he also from his perspective held back the crew due to his inability to match the demands of the pirating world. Post-timeskip, we got this more muscular Usopp that is more durable, has a lot more tools in his belt, and increased accuracy, but still kind of has the same position in the crew. So where does Usopp go from here? First, we have to talk about a pretty important debate about whether or not Usopp develops all the Haki. This might be surprising, but I think he might actually have all three kinds that have been discussed in the show, and probably the nature Haki I've talked about in previous videos. But yes, I think Usopp might get Armament, Observation, and Conquerors. We've already seen Observation, and Armament Haki can be substituted with Sea Stone bullets, but to be honest, the one I want to talk about is Conquerors Haki, because a lot of the theory depends on Usopp getting Conquerors. Okay, so I know, let's breathe real quick. Usopp and Conquerors Haki. I mean, for a lot of reasons, Usopp feels very important to the story. For one, he is the demonstration of how a normal human will be able to conquer the seas through pure bravery. But also, given that Conquerors is related to affecting other spirits, Usopp has been known to have an affinity for spiritual awareness, especially given the fact that he's the only character in the entire show that saw Mary's spirit, which we talked about in a previous video about why that's significant. Then on top of that, there's an interesting list of lies that Usopp has told that have come true, and he has said some big things in the past. The biggest example was how he said he'd have 8,000 warriors, and after Dressrosa we see him become God Usopp and more or less commanding the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Sounds very Conqueror-like. See, charisma comes in many forms, and if someone wanted to argue that anyone could somehow pull off playing the role of God Usopp, I'm not really sure they could. The thing about Usopp is that he's kind of under the mantra of fake it till you make it, and it's really blossoming. We see this especially with the dwarves in Tontada Kingdom in Dressrosa. He lies to them, and though they are gullible, becomes essentially their god and is able to earn their respect earnestly. In a lot of ways, Usopp kind of has a similar power as Luffy, where Luffy can befriend anyone. Everyone wants to support and get behind Luffy, and Usopp manages to gain the respect of so many people through his words and stories. Usopp and Luffy both have exceptional emotional awareness, which is noted to be a significant foundation for Haki mastery by Rayleigh. In Usopp's case, he knows how to really play on people's emotions to make everything he does have more impact. Because of these things, I could honestly see Usopp getting Conquerors Haki. But also there are two examples in the manga that feel similar to Conquerors Haki, and until I find examples to counter it, I'm gonna be kinda convinced that this is some form of Conquerors Haki. The most recent example was when Usopp knocked out Sugar twice. This example isn't too convincing on its own because Usopp scared her and knocked her out, but in the manga, the significant part is that the character starts foaming at the mouth, which is how Conquerors Haki is signified in One Piece. A clear distinction is made for that when Caesar the Clown makes it look like he knocks out his foes with Conquerors Haki, but it's actually because he took out the oxygen, causing people to faint. The people around think it's Conquerors Haki, but in the manga you can tell because no one is foaming at the mouth. The other example is actually when Usopp solos Perona. Usopp in this scene was able to deduce Perona's weakness based on her emotions, then read her emotions and was able to make her believe that he was strong. He made her believe that the cockroaches were real and that he was actually the strongest man in East Blue, and that he could lift a 10-ton hammer. Then based off of his words and actions, he made her believe that she was about to be killed. And then again, Perona was knocked out and had the signature Conquerors Haki foaming at the mouth. When you think of it, that is a pretty significant way of defeating somebody. He somehow, despite his appearance, convinced his opponent that he was capable enough to do such a thing, which shows Usopp's prowess to deceive. He was able to make someone believe his lies by owning his lies, ending the fight, proclaiming his expertise in negativity and lying. Until I can find examples of other characters passing out from fear in the manga and seeing if Oda had them foaming at the mouth, I think these are times when Usopp leaked Conquerors Haki. The Usopp hammering Perona scene actually reminded me of the Zoro scene where he cuts Monet or the Yakuza in Wano, which I talk about in the Zoro video as soul cutting. It's odd but similar, and both relate to some sort of spirit manipulation. So all of this had me thinking, what if Usopp had some kind of Haki trait that allowed him to lie to his opponents? What? Lying to his opponents as a power-up? Okay, yeah, I know, that sounds really weird, but hear me out. If you watch my previous videos, then you know that Rayleigh spoke about the colors of Haki, and I propose that the Hakis can be mixed to create new, unique types of Hakis. I think Usopp is going to get some sort of presence erasing Haki or invisibility Haki. This Haki is something that he could extend to his projectiles and his own body. Essentially, he'd be erasing his presence, actually similar to Kuroko in Kuroko no Basket, or Boruto's Lightning Rasengan. When you think about a power-up for a tactical sniper, this would be an insane power-up. I was thinking about this and thought it was crazy because in that same spread where Zoro is depicted as a tiger, Usopp is depicted as a chameleon. Essentially, he'd become a man who could lie about himself or trick others' sensory perception of him. On top of that, a popular Tengu story is called the Tengu's Magic Cloak. Briefly, the story is basically a guy who proclaims that with his bamboo, he can see distant and magnificent places, which is a lie. This Tengu who overhears this is overcome with curiosity and offers to trade his magic straw cloak for the bamboo tube. The human successfully tricks the Tengu and now obtains a powerful cloak that turns him invisible. I feel like this story already fits Usopp's personality amongst the various stories about Tengus, and it could manifest itself that Usopp is able to trick his surroundings and gain the same invisibility power, kind of like a chameleon. When I think of Usopp in the last few arcs, it kind of feels like Usopp has already been doing this. He is not present, but then shows up at extremely pivotal moments to make a huge impact, which is exactly what a support and tactical sniper is meant to do. To be able to perfectly lie to others, he would need a good grasp of observation haki, which he already does, and he would need a big range of sense, which apparently in Dressrosa he almost had a country-wide range for his observation haki. He would need, in my opinion, an understanding of the fourth haki to blend into nature. He spent 2 years on a nature-dominant island, and in the sniping scene in Dressrosa, you can hear him analyzing the natural components to a sniper shot. We know this kind of haki could probably be possible due to the theory I proposed in my Haki Devil Fruit theory video, where I proposed that at a certain point, peak haki can recreate Devil Fruit powers. And there's the clear Devil Fruit, which alludes to the possibility that invisibility is naturally attainable for some individuals. A preliminary hypothesis I have for this power is that it's attainable by mixing Conquerors and emotional observation haki. By mixing these hakis, I think it may be possible to create illusions, and in Usopp's case, manifest his lies in real time. On top of this, in the near future, Usopp is going to learn how Sanji's raid suit works and get an idea of how it's able to achieve invisibility. So it might be possible that Usopp won't even need haki to turn invisible, but he may be able to still fulfill the Tengu lore and gain invisibility through Sanji's raid suit science. But at the core of the power that I'm describing, it comes down to what Usopp has wanted all along ever since he was a kid. I think that the strongest power in One Piece is definitely willpower, and if Usopp used his haki and could will something to existence, it would be that his words become true. We see this recurring theme for almost all of the Straw Hats when given their backstories and then later develop haki. They end up willing the exact thing that they wish they had as kids. For Zoro, it's to be the strongest swordsman, which also means being able to cut anything. I think this also applies to Chopper, and it makes sense if you watch my Chopper power video. In later videos, I'll talk about Sanji and Luffy and the other Straw Hats. For Usopp, he wishes that the stories he said, the words that came out of his mouth, weren't lies, which means that Usopp might develop a word manifestation power. Kind of like Zagred's power in Black Clover and Inumaki's power in Jujutsu Kaisen. But for those who have read Hardcore Leveling Warrior, there's a character named Constant who coincidentally shares Usopp's birthday, April 1st. His power is more similar to what I think Usopp's power will end up being like. To sum it up, Constant has a power called Liar or Fooler, where he says a lie and the person who is the target of the lie ends up believing it. And this power sounds basic, but it expanded to the point where he could lie to himself and enhance his own abilities and manifest it by convincing his own body that he was capable of things beyond his normal capacity. This power extended out to others as he was able to convince an ally that they were at perfect health and had access to their full powers despite the person being at death's door. Because of Constant's lie, that person was able to reset themselves and fight at full power again, though once the effect of the lie faded and reality returned, the person returned back to their normal state. I know that was a tangent about another manga, but I believe that both of these scenarios have already been demonstrated by Usopp. The power where an ally is able to recover based off of unrealistic words happened in one of the most hyped fights in pre-time skip, Luffy versus Rob Lucci. I have seen a lot of people's takes on this fight, and some people say that it didn't make sense for Luffy to randomly recover and be able to tank 3 more hits from Lucci, then just wipe him with jet Gatling. A possible explanation for how Luffy was able to do this was Usopp. Usopp commands Luffy to stand up, to stop acting like a dying man, saying that this isn't the afterlife, and told them that this wasn't the end of their journey. Obviously, motivational speeches can empower people, but this seemed a little excessive. It kind of felt like it was impossible for Luffy to even die, which makes sense given what he endured afterwards. For some reason, he could not be downed, despite being downed before by the same attacks, but because of Usopp's command to stand up, his body prevented him from falling. I think that his words were so effective that had Usopp said that to anyone else, they probably would have died, and only really Luffy could handle that much strain. This stress factor that Luffy can endure will be highlighted in my Luffy video, but is also apparent when Kuma and Zoro in the next arc quantify that stress that Luffy undergoes during these fights. The other time that it felt like Usopp buffed himself is when he sniped Sugar from across the map. I don't think we've ever seen someone get an awakening for Haki that was this powerful and potent. Like, Enel had something similar, but definitely had years of experience and still couldn't see people, he could only sense them. But before Usopp claimed to make the shot, Kinemon said, "You cannot mean to snipe her from this distance. It is impossible. I can barely even glimpse the palace with the naked eye. And Sugar is beyond the walls. You cannot see her." Then Usopp, without falter, said, "I'm a sniper, and I shoot down the enemy by surprise to protect my people." Then using Viola's all-seeing eye as a guide, which initially helped justify Usopp being able to shoot Sugar down from this distance, but even with the guidance, she was in disbelief that Usopp was able to do what he did. It's like Usopp defied reality and made it so that he was able to see that far anyways, and because of his self-manifestation, he gained observation haki, though I don't think we've ever seen him use this haki outside of Dressrosa. But even more than that, I think it could be argued that this was the most powerful example of base observation haki displayed in the entire show, given that he was able to see that far away. For Usopp, I think I have an idea as to how this power will be utilized at the end of the series, but before I bring that up, I think it makes sense to connect Usopp to one more mythological legend, Loki. The power described in Hardcore Leveling Warrior is theorized to be a precursor to transcendent power based off of Loki, the god of mischief and lies. I think there are a lot of parallels to Loki and Usopp, one being that he has become a god himself in his own right to many during the Dressrosa arc, but it's not a secret that Elbaf pulls a lot of inspiration from Norse mythology, and one of the few people we know on Elbaf is Prince Loki. Loki in Norse mythology has relations to giants, and in some stories he is a giant, but the god Loki is able to shapeshift and change his appearance and deceive people around him. It would be interesting if Usopp and Chopper have a similar relationship in that way. But anyways, I have a feeling that a tale where Usopp mirrors Loki will play out on Elbaf, and through this tale, Usopp will begin to awaken some of the true powers locked inside of him. Some parallel stories have already happened. For example, Loki was known to trick dwarves in creating Mjolnir. While the hammer wasn't created there, Usopp did trick dwarves in Dressrosa. I wanted to create a second Usopp power video after seeing some more of Usopp, and especially because Elbaf is probably Usopp's arc, considering how closely tied he has been to giants throughout the entire story. Like, imagine this theory and tying it to giants. Like, Usopp would be able to lie about his presence and mask it as if he were a giant and cause terror just from his lying haki. That would be kind of badass if he was able to project any aura. Like, reimagine the introduction scene with Usopp where he proclaims that he has an army of 8 million men. The end of series Usopp would be so convincing that you would believe it and actually pass out from the fear of that reality. Besides the hypnotic kind of powers where Usopp is able to make people believe him based on his words and actions, which I want to point out that it's interesting that Usopp's first real villain besides Kuro was Django, who had a non-devil fruit power given to him by a random mushroom that grew on his face and granted him hypnotic powers. But besides that, I think Usopp might be able to manipulate nature in this way. I think we'll learn more about that on Elbaf if that becomes a thing. But it already makes sense with his pop greens. I think another possibility is that Usopp will be able to exaggerate the impact of his attacks, making people see what Usopp wants them to see. So as an example, if Usopp announced he would destroy a mountain, either he would command his shot to do that and trick even the mountain itself that it would be destroyed, or fool the spectators into thinking and seeing that he actually destroyed the mountain. This would obviously be a very useful power for Usopp, but could be a double-edged sword. I think once Usopp gains confidence in himself, he will be able to command his words and make everyone believe him no matter what he says. And lastly, you might be questioning, how does that power even make sense with what we know now? It definitely hinges on if Usopp fulfills his claim of having Conquerors Haki. Taking into account that Conquerors allows you to affect other spirits, we've also determined that everything including inanimate objects have spirits in previous videos, and that Hakis have the potential to be mixed to create greater potentials. I think it's plausible that someone could learn to affect someone's spirit to distort reality for them. On top of that, it is known that emotional Haki sense is a concept that Luffy has awareness of, through the conversations he had with Rayleigh. I think Usopp already has this emotional sense, or at least a strong foundation in it. He is able to sway people's emotions either with his blind positivity or by instilling irrational fear in them. I think even if the powers don't extend out as far as I proclaim in this video, I think it would still be cool if at the minimum, if Usopp is able to turn his projectiles, if not himself, invisible, and also imbue his projectiles with Conquerors Haki, or even emotional effect and crowd control. I can easily see Usopp becoming an insane menace that is also able to learn to protect and escape on his own. To continue the trend for my Straw Hat power theory videos, I think the end of series titles that Usopp will get is definitely God Usopp, Sniper King, Brave Warrior of the Sea, Usopp the Hidden Giant, and the Unbelievable Prophet. I'm not sure if we'll see these predictions come true, but maybe I'll use a little bit of Usopp's power here and manifest it. I'm excited for my next few videos, it'll just be a continuous crescendo from here. Before I go, I wanted to add some things. I think there are more ways to blend Conquerors and observation haki, and we are seeing some examples of it right now in Wano, but I'll save that for another video. But I think there's multiple ways that these haki abilities manage to blend to create unique power potentials for a lot of characters, especially for the Straw Hats. I will probably get into those combinations in tandem to the Devil Fruit power videos surrounding some of the Paramecia powers. Another thing I want to see is that we learn about the Mary's tech from Bao Huang and the Beast Pirates. I made a video about that, so check that out to see what I mean. If Usopp could use this tech to boost his sniping, that would be wild. He could substitute Viola, who could see through everything. With the Mary's tech, Usopp could gain an eagle eye type of ability. Maybe stick one of these on Zoro so we can track him even if he's lost. The last thing I want to address is that Oda has said that no matter who joins, he always wants Usopp to be the weakest. I think this theory satisfies that requirement because none of these abilities makes Usopp any stronger or durable. It increases his survivability and amplifies his personality. But even more so, Oda said this because amongst the crew, Usopp is the one that is closest to strength to a regular human. I think that the real strength of humans does not lie in our physicality. I think the most powerful tool that humans have is the tongue. The tongue has started wars, ended wars, and has the power to mobilize people to act. Just like what Usopp said in that excerpt I mentioned before. At the end of the day, people have said that Usopp is sort of role-less in the crew, but I think Usopp may fulfill one of the most vital roles for any legend, and that's the one who spreads the stories. Even when you think of Roger, what made him a legend wasn't just his magnificent actions, it was also the stories told about him and how they spread throughout the world. Anyways, that's all for now. I'll definitely be making follow-up videos on Usopp soon. Thank you for connecting with me, and I hope you're looking forward to the next Parvisions.